We always talk about how Saw Gerrera's partisans were not accepted by the wider alliance to restore the Republic. It's common knowledge that he wasn't invited to all of the little secret meetings that Mon Mothma was holding on Yavin 4 right before a series of crazy events kicked the Galactic Civil War off into high gear. A lot of you might be wondering why that is. After all, Saw's partisans seem to be really good at killing stormtroopers and causing general mayhem. Well, in order to understand this, you have to think bigger picture. You have to place yourself in the shoes, or maybe slippers, of rebel leader Mon Mothma. See, Mon Mothma didn't come from a military background. She was a legislator, an individual who for a living played the games of politics and influence. She worked on bills and tried to convince a diverse group of other legislators to support her initiatives. She also had to campaign for her position and get voters to like her. She was essentially a professional organizer of people. Now, Mon Mothma might not have known how to properly carry out an ambush against an enemy foot patrol, but she definitely understood the type of damage that a smaller tactical victory could have on a larger strategic game of overthrowing an authoritarian regime. And so today, in order to further explain why Mon Mothma saw the partisans' behavior as very detrimental to the overall rebellion, we're going to take an in-depth look at the skirmish on Jedha City and show you exactly why the partisans were a pretty messed up organization. Prior to the Jedha City mining accident, which destroyed a good portion of the planet, Rebel intelligence had been surveying several Imperial worlds with increased Imperial traffic and the tactical deployment of Imperial forces. There were about a dozen worlds they were monitoring, including Jedha. Jedha was under communications blackout, and the Imperial security protocol on that planet was extremely high for what was essentially a backwards planet. General Davis Draven was in the midst of Operation Fracture, which was trying to piece together what exactly the Empire's Secret Weapons Division was up to, and had noticed several communiques from Imperial Director Orson Krennic leading to the planet. Draven sent several rebel operatives onto Jedha City to figure out what's going on, and they all basically disappear. And so, out of desperation, Draven tries to contact the partisans, but of course, they don't cooperate with them. We would later find out that the partisans were fully aware of the Empire's kyber crystal harvesting operation on the planet. As a matter of fact, it was later revealed that Saw Gerrera had stolen many of these kyber crystals from the Empire and was hoarding them in his secret hideout beneath the catacombs of Jedha. For years, Saw had actually been conducting his own operation on why the Imperials were mining all of this kyber. Again, it would have been great if he and the Rebel Alliance had cooperated with one another. Maybe they could have figured out what was going on a lot sooner. Furthermore, the defection of Bodhi Rook, an Imperial pilot, to Saw Gerrera's partisans had raised red flags on the Imperial military channels, and this information had reached the top of the military hierarchy. Director Orson Krennic, who was in charge of the Death Star project, was in the midst of a power struggle with Imperial Governor Wilhelm Tarkin. The latter had his eyes on the Death Star weapon and wanted control over it himself. With the growing instability on Scarif, Tarkin saw his opportunity to remove Orson Krennic from the picture. The defection of Bodhi Rook was the straw that broke the camel's back, and now Tarkin wanted to challenge Director Orson Krennic by having him test his weapon on Jedha City itself. Saw Gerrera and the partisans didn't just walk up to the Imperials and ask them nicely for the kyber crystals. They didn't even carry out covert operations and, steal things at night. Instead, they usually just use very aggressive force. Trained during the Clone Wars by the Jedi and Clone Special Forces, Saw Gerrera was a master of asymmetrical warfare, and more importantly, he stopped at nothing to achieve whatever goal he set out to do. Apparently, once the partisans even used explosives laden with flechettes on civilians who supported the Empire. Just in case you don't know what those fragments look like, here's a picture. So as you can see, Saw Gerrera doesn't just want to kill his enemies, he wants them to fear him. He's essentially a terrorist. Prior to the arrival of Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso on their fact-finding mission to Jedha, Saw Gerrera and his partisans had carried out several attacks on the local Imperial garrison. I mean, just take a look at the patrol we're going to be taking a look at later in the ambush. They have a full-on TX-225 combat assault tank. and a heavily equipped rifle squad with them. This most likely was not how Imperial patrols looked like in the beginning of their occupation of Jedha. This is clearly the result of escalation from both sides. Basically, the Empire is now putting a lot more effort into keeping their Kyber shipments safe. As a matter of fact, initial reports stated that the Star Destroyer over the city used to be a lot further away and a lot less menacing. And so with each successful partisan attack, the Empire would just kill more local civilians and arrest more people as their act of reprisal. Jedha City was a crowded place. It was an old city with cluttered streets, chock full of salesmen and religious pilgrims. The Imperials ran their convoys through the city to the spaceport in order to ferry the precious Kyber crystals off-world. But no matter how much they varied their route or how many stormtroopers they assigned to the convoy, the Partisans were always a step ahead. Now, Gerrera could have attacked the Imperials when they were outside of the city, or perhaps in an emptier part of the city, like closer to the ports where the warehouses would be located. But if you were to do that, that would probably endanger his men a lot more to return fire, and there would be less places for them to hide. And so instead, the Partisans choose to set up their ambush in Tythani Square, right in the middle of the Holy Quarter District, the most densely packed area in the entire city, which again is full of merchants and pilgrims. The ironic thing is that before the attack, there were rumors around the city that Gerrera was trying to get his revenge on the Empire for arrests they had carried out against the Jedha civilians the night before. The Partisans apparently wanted to free the city from Imperial occupiers, but my feeling is that most of the Jedha City inhabitants probably wanted both the Partisans and the Imperials gone. Now, the Partisans set up an L-shaped ambush with shooters at street level and in the buildings in front and to the left of the convoy. Big hats off for whoever designed this battle. It really gives us a sense that the Partisans know what they're doing. The Partisans start off their ambush by throwing a detonator in front of the patrol's assault tank. These things have a 20-meter blast radius, and the fragments from these detonators can probably go a lot further than that. This shows us that the Partisans do not care at all about killing civilians that might just be in the area. On top of that, you're not really going to do much against Imperial armor with a detonator. And while the L-shaped ambush is well set up and prevents the Partisans from shooting into each other, a classic Hollywood mistake, but you actually still had civilians standing on the other side of the L and getting fired upon. On top of that, Saw had snipers in the rooftop areas in the civilian buildings, and of course the Empire would use their tanks to destroy the entire building. And notice how this tiny child is just standing in the open crying. Well, there's actually a fighter kneeling right next to her, and he completely ignores her. Only Jyn Erso seems to care about her welfare. The Partisans claim that they were on Jedha trying to protect the local citizens, but I call total BS on that. I wouldn't be surprised if more Jedha citizens died in this encounter than Imperials did. Remember, the Empire blew up an entire building to kill one sniper. And ultimately, one of the many reasons why Wilhelm Tarkin has Orson Krennic destroyed Jedha City was to wipe out the Partisans. It's completely possible that if the Partisans had never launched all these attacks, that Jedha might have been saved its terrible fate. Mon Mothma understood that the Galactic Civil War was an ideological fight. It wasn't just about hurting the Empire, it was also about presenting a better, more moral alternative to the Empire. The rebels never really stood a chance against the gigantic Imperial Navy. But if they could turn the galaxy against the Empire, if they could turn the majority against a small ruling elite, then they had a shot of winning.
You target civilians, kill those who surrender, break every rule of engagement. If we degrade ourselves to the Empire's level, what will we become?
And if you guys think what Saw Gerrera's Partisans did was bad, well, wait till you see the group that follows the Partisans known as the Dreamers. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy,